Hui ki te pō, tawi ki te hau ki tu nui o te whare o takaro o tōru o te mea, tai a te rangi, tupu te rangi, horehia he manawa. Te uhi ka rawe te tau, te uki ana whawhai. Eke tangaroa, tūtuki ki te rangi, haumi e, hui e, tāki e. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou ko tatu mai nei roto i tēnei whare. E tāmaki tinitini taringa, tāmaki tinitini arero. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou hakatau mai nei roto i tēnei kaupapa. Te kaupapa a tāmaki whiti kōrero. Nō reira i roto e tēnā he mihi tēnei kia rātou kua wehe atu. Moi mai rā i roto i ngā ringa tōtoro tātua. Tātou e hikoi tonu kei a tātou te kaipapa. Kia whai haere i ngā tikanga a koromā a kuiamā. Kia haere tonu ngā rea e heke mai nei i roto i tēnā āhuatanga. Nō reira tēnei te mihi kia koutou, i roto i tēnā he mihi tonu. I'll just translate that for you. Welcome to this whare, tāmaki of thousands of ears and even more tongues. Welcome to tāmaki conversations or tāmaki whiti kōrero. My job here is to whakatau you and to settle you down into this kaupapa led by our most able MC, Ropata Harvey. And also a remembrance, as we do in Māori, as we do in New Zealand, remembering those who have gone before us. Because those of us who still walk the earth, we have the responsibility to ensure those that follow us understand the sacrifice and the hard work that they did before we were here. So I roto tēnā tēnei te mihi kia koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Kia ora tātou. Kia ora everyone. Glenn, thank you. Thank you for reminding us of our destiny, if you like. If I look around here, a lot of us go to a lot of funerals. It's just the way it is, I guess. And it's kind of okay. I think one of the parts that I like about aging, I hate the word old, I do. I think it's got to be banished. But I think as you age, it is nice to farewell people that you have lived with and loved in your lifetime. And I guess that is what we are about, really. You're passing on something very precious. You're passing on your wisdom, your knowledge. And this morning when I woke up quite early this morning and I thought, well, what am I going to say? Janet will probably say, well, you always thought that, Bob, when people wrote speeches for you, and they wrote these beautiful speeches, and then you've never said them. They went, that dreadful mayor, I wrote this speech all weekend, and I said, well, I used to, didn't I, Janet? So as the moment came, I think, it's called when the moment comes, and you're asked to make such a commitment, really, to an age-friendly city like Auckland, which has been in my life for 78 years, 79 years. It's been a pleasure just to read some of the notes, some of the thoughts of what we're going to talk about tonight. So I guess I don't, as they say, need too much introduction. I'm Sir Bob Harvey. I was born in Ponsonby and moved west, of which I found such an irresistible urge to be a Westie. I could never come back. And I used to say to people, I haven't been back to Auckland for years. Have they finished the Sky Tower yet? And I thought I would just keep it being in the West. And I'm proud to say this is a bit of a Westie takeover. When I read this wonderful panel and who we are, I thought there's too many Westies here. But the fact is, we are so passionate about the whole region, really. I'm so interested in the conversation we're going to have in the next hour, because this conversation belongs to you. And so I hope that right now you're thinking of questions, or you've been thinking of questions that you need to ask. Because I think the Auckland conversations are about ideas, they're about inspiration, and it provides an opportunity to inspire and stimulate your thinking about the challenging face of Auckland. And certainly we're at an age and a time that it is challenging. It is challenging to think, where next? Where is technology taking us? Where is our lives taking us? In the path, the journey ahead, we'll stay around. The good news is, if you're over 70, say science, you'll go to 80. And if you're 80, you'll get to 90 maybe. Now, we're the first generation to actually have such wonderful stats. The health system, our mind, our bodies seem to be holding up, I reckon, pretty well. Not everyone suffers these days like our grandparents did. We find ways of lasting. So tonight we welcome a panel of, I think, terrific experts to discuss how we could work collaboratively to develop a plan for an age-friendly city. I can't imagine a better city, really, if you got rid of some of those red cones, and we could ride electric bikes more, we should, and walk more, we should. I think it's an absolute gem to be part of where we are and who we are. So in planning an age-friendly city, I want you to take part and certainly to develop together your thoughts on how it can be better and why it should be better. And don't forget, it's election year. So we've got some political thinking to do and some thoughts to pass on to those that would represent us. I guess because we have obtained the membership of the World Health Organization, the global network of age-friendly cities, it stimulates us to see how communities can really take the lead, really. And the age-friendly communities, to me, is truly exciting. I refuse to think that any of us feel left behind. We mustn't be left behind, because we've built this country and we've lived through some pretty important things. We lived through Muldoon, for God's sake, and survived. And we did do our work in the Springbok tours. I hope you're on my side. And some nuclear free. We told the French what they should do with their nuclear weapons. And we've lived through great times. And we're one of the few generations we know that have gone from one millennium to another. That takes some doing. And along the way, we've seen New Zealand, I think, develop and grow. And I'm very proud to be a New Zealander. Sometimes I feel enormously proud. The Christchurch disaster, tragedy, shook us greatly. But we seem, I believe, to have emerged as a kinder, more thoughtful, and a different New Zealand. We left behind, if you like, that cloak koroa of safety. But we also grew in stature and in warmth, and certainly with a Prime Minister that did something that I thought was absolutely amazing, that no man could do. So these are the times that we think who we are and where we are. And so I've got to do some housekeeping before we get going, as the rules are, and they're good rules. In the unlikely event, as they say in planes, of an emergency, an alarm will sound, and we'll be directed out of the building by our ushers. That's pretty damn good news. And bathrooms, if you need it. I'm sure I don't see anybody running right now to the bathrooms, but we're an age where we do tend to run to the bathrooms a bit more than younger people do. They're outside to the left and the right and the ballroom entrance. And finally, could you please turn off the mobiles? So that's the housekeeping rules. And now I guess I'd like to thank our terrific sponsors. The sponsors are for our Auckland partners, South-Based Construction, thank you for that, and design partner, Resine, and all our program supporters. So we're away, really. We've got technology on our side. We've got a brief, and the format of tonight will be a short presentation from myself to kind of kick it off, followed by a discussion with our panellists who will be joining us very soon. And we'll then open up for discussion to questions from the floor. This is an audience where I'd like a lot of questions from the floor live and vigorous and full of thought. And I guess discussion and concern about where to now. So it'll be a terrific interactive question and answer. And if you have a smartphone, we encourage you to visit the slido.com. And I have a little machine up here which will give us your questions. But we'll take those as we get them coming through. We've thought through many questions that the panel can think about and deliver. And so feel free to raise your hand, and I can see you very clearly, with a question. Either a mic will come to you, or if you feel comfortable, we'll just find you anyway. And so you're also welcome to tweet. When I think of tweeting, I think of Donald Trump. But during the event, so if you're good at tweeting, then please use the hashtag, that's AKL Conversations. And we'll pick that up as we go. We always try to ensure that the Auckland Conversations events are inclusive and accessible, and that's pretty damn good. And demand viewing of an event, on-demand viewing of an event. So that's how the night goes. I'd just like to say, because this is a council event, 3 cheers for the council for this week, cheering on climate control and voting unanimously. I just want to say to them how proud I felt for the Auckland Council to show such terrific leadership in what is the most difficult and complex situation. I was with my good friend Sir Stephen Tyndall talking about this today. So we're both the same age. We're both old surf club guys. We spend our life swimming and things like that, but we also spent our life thinking about the future. And we both thought it was a great move. And the Mayor was showing leadership, Penny Hulse, leading that from the chair. So it's a good week. It's been a very good week to think of the future, really. Older Aucklanders are increasingly becoming part of the region's population. That's no news to us. So how do we work towards making sure that older Aucklanders and those approaching that age group are respected and valued in our community? Do you feel we're valued in the community? Do you feel there's enough things for us to take part in, to do? What are the disadvantages? I mean, I thought when the Super City was unveiled that there would be a lot of disadvantage, and yet somehow I feel many of us see a better, a unified city where we feel Aucklanders and not necessarily part of something, part of those that were often left out. So I think that Auckland to us has certainly substantial numbers and a greater portion, of course, a diverse culture, which I think is terrific. And it's so a joy to me to see how those wonderful new cultures have embraced us as we've embraced them. And in our lives, we've seen festivals, colourful cultures of food, of dance, of music. But we never knew as young people, and I certainly celebrate that, as I'm sure you do. And so the ageing population will create opportunities as well as greater and more complex demand for services and infrastructure. There's a lot to be said about that. That's happening in the next 10 years. Some older Aucklanders have needs that are not being met by existing services. And while Auckland is a great place to live for most older people, there are those that face greater challenges because of it. There is older groups, I'm talking of 85 plus, who don't speak English, and older people with a lower socioeconomic status that are more likely to be feeling out of the conversation, I reckon. And there's those that simply with health and the feeling of being isolated and alone. I really grieve for that, those people that do feel isolated. But I also think that younger people are really understanding the plight, if you like, of ageing, and are very kind in residential and flats and apartments with people that may be alone. And there's a greater feeling and understanding than there was maybe even 10 years ago of what age is like. So tonight's discussion will focus on how we can work collaboratively together. And without any further ado, I'm going to ask the panel to come up. Or maybe I'll show you a quick little slide. And do you think we should do my bit? I'd worked on a little bit of an idea. This is living in an age-friendly city. And to kick it off, I've always been an ideas man, if you like. And last year, I was in Japan. We had a sister city there. And I spent 3 days in the forests of Japan, which I hadn't been before. I loved walking, and I used to love running too. And one of my dear friends from the sister city we used to have talked about forest bathing. And I thought this was a pretty unique kind of idea, the idea of going out in the forest, and as we do here, as we do in the Waitakere Ranges and parks, in what they have scientifically found our relationship with nature and trees. And forest bathing isn't about taking our clothes off. I want to make that clear, even though for years I was the patron of the Rānui Nudist Club, of which Janet Clews did not approve, I know, and nor did any of the cousins, but I didn't give a damn. But this is not about that, Janet, I'm pleased to say, so stay tuned. It's about us in relationship to trees and walking in the trees. And the University of Tokyo, I think, have actually taken older people's blood pressure, if you like, stress, heart, and researched it the day before forest therapy and the day after forest therapy. And it's just a very quick presentation, but I'm sure you get the drift. And I became absolutely inspired by this, the idea of walking, not tramping, but walking amongst giant trees, kauri, of course, totara, walking in the forest and actually getting close to trees has this terrific effect on our health and well-being. And certainly with blood pressure, wow, down comes blood pressure. And certainly our health seems to improve enormously. It's like measuring the soul in a way, the outdoor joy and purpose. And so I thought I'd just touch that. And I know Unity Books have the book on forest bathing. It's about $30, which is pretty reasonable, which has these pages of scientific therapy. And I have to show you some of my favourite people. This guy is 90 years old. And being a gym rat that I am, I just thought, this is called living pretty well. At 90, I would like to be like that. This guy's 100. And last year, I was asked to do a documentary on ageing and swimming and surfing. And they'd selected me because I'm still a lifeguard at Karikari, where I've been for about 65 years. I sit on the tower with a guy who's 80. I'm 79 and he's 80. And we boss our kids around. Our kids, of course, are in their 40s. And their kids are in their 10 or 12 years old. And this year, this old geezer, Stuart and I, we've been sitting on that tower for 63 years. Most people have been married for 63 years. And we've been sitting there and we did 5 rescues this year. So that's not too bad. This guy, I don't think he's done any rescues, but there's his longboard. And at 100, that's not too bad. And this is the well-known Clint Eastwood, who I just adore. And he's just made the most amazing movie called The Mule. You may have seen it. But he's 80 years old and still alert, writing, directing film, international films. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to flash him by. And Dick Frizzell, who's been a lifelong friend of mine, is 78. And he's still working every day in his studio. We're doing a little show in this historic week coming up about a painter together, him and I, just doing a collaboration. So this is called living, really. Living in the now, living not in the past, but in the future. And Fiona Kidman, I remember when I was a young man walking up the road and she was walking Rotorua, and I said, "What are you doing today?" She said, "I'm getting married, and I'm just going to the hairdresser." And we've stayed friends all our lives, and I'm just in awe of her. She just won the Book Awards, the Auckland Book Award, and she writes every day. And these are the things that I reckon inspire us. I still have mentors. I'm sure you do. I talk to leadership groups and say, find mentors. These are people, I think, that to me are my mentors. She's a writer, I'm a writer. And the marvellous Mary Woodward, who's a Westie, and she's 90. This remarkable woman just launched her book on her memoirs. She was one of the first Miss New Zealand contestants. She won way back in 1947, I think. Yeah, 49. She was the first Miss New Zealand, with no bathing suits, I might say, but at those times. But she went to London, met everybody, toured Britain for about a month, and wrote about that. And now at 90, she's still writing. She writes amazingly well, and her mind is great. And she claims that the reason that she is so alert is because she reads and writes every day. And Janet, you've got to have good mentors. Janet was my mayor in Gleneden when I was a young man, and went along and asked her to change the name of Gleneden to Carrylands. She told me to get out, and Gleneden was what she was going to call it. And I thought, well, gee, that's a pretty interesting kind of woman. And we've had this remarkably wonderful relationship when I became the mayor, and she's still telling me off, I think. And I just love it. But she'll be on our panel. So these are people that I think at an age of a wonderful time of their lives. And my good self, still in the surf at Karikari, and still plucking people out and sorting out things that really matter. So without further ado, let me introduce the panel. First is Janet Clews, CN, ZM, QSO. She's the chair of the Auckland Council's Seniors Advisory Panel. She's been involved in local government for more than 50 years, serving as the Waitakere City Councillor since the city was formed in 1989, and she previously served as Deputy Mayor and Mayor of Gleneden Borough. Janet Clews, would you join us on stage? And Gloria Gao, as you can see, she is the Senior Manager, Social Services, CNSST Foundation, and just amazingly fine woman. With our Chinese communities, and one of the largest Asian community organisations in New Zealand, providing social services of education and social housing for 15,000 people a year. That's astonishingly good. And I'd like now to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Ann Broadbent, Professor of Health Psychology at the University of Auckland. I'm so fond of Elizabeth because she is so fond of robots, and I also feel that robots are going to play a larger part in our lives, in that technology as companions, and would you believe it, I think friends to many people that are alone and lonely. And I'd love her to talk a little bit about that. She initially trained as an electrical engineer, electronic engineer at Canterbury University to pursue her interests in robotics. So this is an incredible, wonderful brain working on how we can move our thinking, I guess. And then I have Megan Tyler. Where is Megan here? Hello, Megan, there you are. I also think that she almost needs no introduction, but she has an enormously important job, which is Chief of Strategy at the Auckland Council. She's a proud Westie, I might say, but she discovered planning as a professional in the last year. And I'm so proud that Megan has that job. It's an enormously serious job for a woman of great, I think, respect and thinking about how cities operate, how cities are part of us, both the political city, the social city and the cultural city. So that adds to a terrific panel. And now Glenn Wilcox, Deputy Chairman, Independent Māori Statutory Board, and a superb New Zealander. I might say he lived in Titirangi for a long time and is a dear friend of all of us. So that completes our panel, and I'd like now to ask, I guess, the first questions. To you, Janet, the question is, there is a huge pool of expertise within the senior community, and how can this be harnessed, I guess, for the benefit of society as a whole? Your thoughts?
It's a bit hard to gather them after your introduction, but I'll try. Could I, before I speak about that, could I just say how appreciative we are on the panel of the work that's been done since the decision was taken to join the network, the age-friendly network, because it hasn't been easy, but Council and particularly the staff that support us, I'd like to thank them. And I'd also like, in the same vein as Glenn alluded to, remember those who went before. This is the second seniors panel, and some of our colleagues on the first panel did not return to the panel. So we'd like to pay tribute to those people who were there and started the work in Council. We got to a full stop at the end of that 3 years, which was rather traumatic, we thought. And so we had to regather our forces and come back. And Council then got the message and has done what they've done now, and we appreciate it. So particularly I'd like to remember Margaret Devlin, who was the chair of that committee, because she even contacted me last night to say she wasn't able to be here today but would have loved to have been. So we do appreciate that, and all the work that goes on behind the scenes to get us to where we are, and the fact that we're even there at all and being listened to. So why I've raised this as my question is because it was one of the arguments that we took to Council, that there was a huge untapped, or partially untapped anyway, pool of expertise within the senior community. And not long ago, I attended a business breakfast, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But the main thing, of course, to remember is that there's a huge amount of volunteering done by, I'm sure, everybody in this room. Sometimes it goes unnoticed, but it is there, and it is appreciated by the people that you are volunteering for, of course. But the wider community needs to know about that. And I think everyone, certainly those of us who've been in local government for a while, recognise that without volunteers, our society would actually crumble, because there's never enough money to do everything, is there? And we know that. And this is not about being greedy oldies, the age-friendly thing. Let's say that for a start. It's about being age-friendly. It's not spelt with a D, it's not aged, it's age-friendly. That means for all ages. And if we get the young ones right and the old ones right, it's right for everybody. So, but coming back to the expertise that's there, I went to a business breakfast where there was a very high-powered panel of professional men who are running huge businesses that are on the international stage. And one of them, Bob, was the group general manager for Glide Path, a woman, and remembering that Glide Path, now a huge international company that provides all the infrastructure for airport luggage and that sort of thing, began its little
In Kelston.
In Glen Eden. That part of Kelston
Sorry
is
about
Glen
that.
Eden,
God, don't get that right.
not Cowreylands. He at that stage, I'll just have to add that, he at that stage had no idea that Cowreylands was down the bottom of the road and it was not part of Glen Eden. However, to get back to what we were talking about,
This went on at the council when I was the mayor, of course, so I can tell you that.
and we had to have, he was always the one that said the jokes. We weren't allowed to.
They weren't that good, Janet.
Anyway, the discussion was an excellent one. It was very uplifting, actually, before breakfast. And then they all contributed, and one of the things that came out of that early part of the discussion was the fact that nowadays the younger workforce seems to only want to stay for about 5 years and then they're off. And of course that wasn't so in our earlier work time, was it? You went into something, you may not stay there for all your life, but you'd stay there for a long time and gradually take your promotion if that's what you wanted. But what came out of that was that they were having trouble, of course, keeping things flowing in the right direction. And I always worry about where the institutional knowledge goes to when that sort of rotation happens. So I was about to ask a question, but I didn't have to because there was someone in the audience, and I think he might be here tonight, who asked it for me. And he brought up the subject of the fact that older people actually were very, very loyal to their companies, that they stayed for a long time. And why didn't some of these businesses look at taking on older people that might want to work 2 or 3 days a week instead of a full-time occupation? So that sounded pretty good. Anyway, they all discussed it, and one of the businesses that was represented on that panel was an HR business, and the man had been in the corporate world, had moved into his own business and had been in business for 7 years and was now doing very well indeed. And so he was questioned on that, and he said yes, he would be going back to rethink how he interviewed and developed his suggestions to the client about how he could perhaps handle this problem and help, therefore, the business, because the skills of the older person, if it was in the right direction, would be able to be used to mentor young ones, help them through, show them the way. And while everything does change, the sort of person that's been in a high-powered job there would still be interested in the changes that were going on, I'm sure. So that was where the thought came from about the lack of institutional knowledge. And I think we've seen that in local government, having gone through 2 reorganisations of local government in Auckland. The first time was really traumatic when we went from the smaller boroughs into the larger cities. And I think this last one has been very traumatic for staff, which I think is unfortunate, although I think that Auckland Council has tried in latter years, since they've got themselves established more securely, to encourage back some of the older people that they had put to one side, let's say, at the beginning.
Put out to pasture.
Yes, put out to pasture, but I was being polite.
Thank you, Gemma. Thank you.
So, they do try, I think, and that is a very good thing to happen, because nobody knows everything, do they?
Thank you.
And we can all support one another. So I just want you to think about that and see whether you would be prepared to think that way when you younger ones that are not yet retired get to that stage, whether you would like to work shorter hours and still keep your hand in, as it were, and you older people, whether you would be interested in doing that sort of thing too, to mentor and work with others. So
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a very good answer. I see that the Slido is giving us lots of questions, but I'm going to move now to Gloria. Gloria, welcome, ni hao. And it's so good for you to be here with a question to you. As you know, Auckland is now the world's in the top 4 diverse cities. While we plan for age-friendly Auckland, it's important to engage, we all would agree, with the ethnic older people's community. Could you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, you do amazing things, and it's a terrific CV. Tell us a little bit about you and how you do it.
Yes. Thank you for the question, Sir Bob Harvey. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be here to share with you as a panel speaker today. Actually, I have a mission today. I want to refresh your understanding about our ethnic community and ethnic elderly community in Auckland today. Hopefully, my conversation will contribute to that point today. So firstly, I'd like to talk about my first view is that we encourage the attitude, the proper and the positive attitude towards the ethnic aging population and the community. Because actually, as you know, the majority of them, you know about the standard format of our living like a family is a 3-generation family in Auckland, as you know. We have the grandparents, parents, and the younger generation. And the grandparents, the Asian generation, they were brought into New Zealand through the family category immigration with their skilled migrant children. Actually, because of their language and cultural barriers here, they have limited engagement and contribution to because of those barriers. But actually, they are the group with intelligence and also with wisdoms, and they bearing the great values from the old traditions that's educating the younger generation. And their great contribution to our society actually is that they are supporting the family chores, taking care of the grandchildren. Well, our parents, like me and my husband, both of us are the full-time workers. Actually, without their support, we are not able to do full-time work to contribute to New Zealand society. That's the reality. Yep. So thanks to our parents and the ethnic aging community in Auckland, with their support and contribution, we are able to maximize our strengths and skills and knowledge to contribute to our Auckland and our society. That's my first point. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I do encourage the respectful and the positive attitudes towards them, even though they might have limited skills to communicate with you, but they have their hearts, they want to contribute. And one more example for this is that after like the younger generation grown up, they started to contribute and to integrate into the society by using their own skills. One typical example is that I worked together with one senior dancing group, and the last collaboration we had was a multicultural event for Southern Cross campus in Manukau, and we organized a cultural session for over 700 local students, and they performed, the dancing group, they performed the traditional dance for the children while I did the cultural presentation. So that's a wonderful contribution from them, even though they had the language barrier, but they used their culture and the art skills to celebrate the diversity and to promote the culture, so which was really respected and valued. So they actually, for the elderly community, they do want to contribute, even though they have their barriers over there. So that's another example.
Thank you very much.
Secondly, is regarding, so what we do about the age-friendly planning, it's very important to understand the needs and the values, actually. So for needs of the ethnic community, apparently I think all of you have been aware of the cultural and language barrier as the number one barrier for them to live in English-speaking country. Even though they try to make efforts to study English, but they do have still, the barrier is still there. And the CNCST Foundation will organize a 550 people, elderly people survey, and 90% of the participants have been identified that their number one barrier is the language and cultural barrier. Yeah. So, and as we all know, social isolation is one of the results caused by that barrier, and so that they have the limited access to the public facilities, social systems, and even their rights to engage with the community and to vote, to take part in the demographic process, and etc. So, and I want to share some values and also the historical background with you as well, because this specific generation of the elderly people, actually, they were born in a special historic period, because before 1978, actually, it was quite a closed business environment in China, and they had a very difficult time lacking in resources. So their day-to-day daily essential needs were not able to be met. So they had those kind of difficult life while they were at their younger age. That's why they carry the value. They want to save something to pass their assets and properties to their next generation. So the next generation can avoid those kind of difficult time. That's their values. So in that case, they carry a kind of low-cost lifestyle. Yeah, so not that like, and they always want to save something and just give something to their children. So that's part of the values. And also, because of the law and legislations in China, actually is, according to the law, the children, they are obliged to take care of the elderly where they get aged. So same thing where the children were younger, the parents had the obligation, according to the law, to raise their children. So because of those historical background and also their values, for their lifestyle and also their age care choice, where they're getting aged, they prefer a home-based care, actually, instead of the social environment. So that's the current generation that we have. Because they have those kind of core family values. They want to be staying at home to have the rest of their life. Yeah, so that's one thing I want to share with you. So in conclusion, actually, because we have a diversity population and with the culture and the language barrier, while we do the city planning, it's very important to be aware of the diversity and also to have the culturally and linguistically appropriate strategic planning, resource allocation, infrastructure, and social support services, and etc. And more importantly, and very importantly, is that we carrying a respectful and a positive attitude towards the ethnic and also the overall aging population. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gloria. Thank you. Thank you. Beautifully put. Dr. Elizabeth Broadbent. Elizabeth, how might social robotics technology be able to assist older adults with health, loneliness, and isolation? This is all your world, and we're all yours.
Okay, thank you. So today I want to talk about kind of 4 types of robots and how they might be helpful for people's social isolation and health. So the first type of robot is more of a pet type robot or a companion type robot. And several villages in New Zealand have got some of these robots. So one is called Paro, and Selwyn Village has bought 13 of these. And these are a seal, so it's built like a baby harp seal. So it's fluffy and it's got a heater inside it so that it's body temperature. It's got sensors all over its body, and you pat it and it makes seal noises and it moves its flippers and its tail. And trials with this robot have shown that it can reduce loneliness, and this may be because people get companionship from the robot itself, so they enjoy patting it and it's like a pet in that way. Secondly, other people like talking to them about that robot. So it's like when you take your dog for a walk and people talk to you and they say, what's the name of your dog? How old is he, etc. They talk to you about the robot as well, so that it can increase human-to-human interactions as well. And this robot has also been shown to have benefits for people with dementia, and that includes reducing agitation and also reducing depression. So it's over 5,000 of these robots have been sold worldwide. So they're not for everybody. It's mainly the oldest that they're useful for, but a lot of people do find them beneficial. Another kind of robot is more of a cognitive type robot, and there are companies and universities working on these around the world, and they are more like robots that you have at home, and these ones will remind you to do things. So things like reminding you to take your medication, guiding you through some physical exercises, telling you about various health conditions that you might have, so providing a bit of education, as well as having functions like monitoring your blood pressure. It's got a sort of telepresence function on it so that you can easily have Skype-type conversations with your grandchildren or with a healthcare provider. And research with these robots have also shown that people form a sort of emotional bond with the robot and they talk to it, and it can also help improve their adherence to medication and how often they do their exercises. And then there's another kind of robot which is more like providing physical assistance. So these robots tend to be more expensive, but they can do things like be attached to a wheelchair to help people who might be paraplegic and can't use their arms, so help them to feed themselves, for example. There's also robots that can help with stroke rehabilitation. So if you have a stroke, it's important that you do exercises, for example, movement in your hand and arm, and to help regrow those brain connections. And so the more you do these exercises, the better, but there aren't enough physiotherapists to help everybody. So robots can help people to practice these movements again and again by providing some guidance. And then just lastly, I want to touch on conversational agents as well, so artificial intelligence. And so there's Amazon Alexa, for example, which is a speaker. It's very easy to use, and it's very popular in the United States. It's slightly less popular here, but you can talk to this speaker, artificially intelligent speaker, ask it what the weather is like, ask it to tell you a joke, all sorts of things. You can ask what's the news today, play this music, and people are finding that they can be very helpful for looking up, asking about symptoms as well, like health symptoms, and building in health applications. So those are 4 kinds of robotic or artificial intelligent technologies that are starting to be used around the world, and I think offer great potential to add additional ways of accessing health services and helping people who might be isolated or who cannot own their own pets now that they're older and may not be as able to get to hospital services.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Terrific. I'm sure there'll be some questions to our panel. That's part of the idea. And now, of course, Megan. Megan, our strategic advisor, I guess, for our city and our future. Megan, very warm welcome.
Look, it's a real pleasure, kia ora koutou, to be here tonight. And I do want to leave some time for questions, so let me just be brief. I guess if I could just very quickly say that as a council, we often play a part in all of this. The central government's also a big player, as are our universities and all sorts of other organisations and communities around making this an age-friendly city or somewhere that is comfortable to live in. As Janet said, for the young and the old, therefore everybody is comfortable in the city. Sir Bob, in his introduction, raised the World Health Organization Global Network for Age-Friendly Cities and Communities. I've had to write that down because it's just not natural, but it's a long word. And so, as Sir Bob and Janet said, we are looking to join that network. And so what we're doing right now as a city is engaging, as we speak, and this is part of it, on an action plan for an age-friendly city. So I'm hoping that all of you have heard about that. If you haven't, you now have, and we would love to get your involvement in that. But that action plan, and it's looking for kind of 65, age 65 and over, in terms of how the city could better develop, have systems and processes in place to enable it to be as friendly and as useful as possible. Of course, Auckland and Auckland Council have roles in that in terms of transportation, whether that's the choice of transport, public transport, more affordable transport than just a car, particularly where through age or health someone's unable to drive. We need to provide different opportunities to get out, have that social inclusion kind of area. Also, different choices and types of housing. So as family units and kind of decrease over our lifetimes, people may want to go into a retirement home, of course, or they may want to live on their own, and so or in couples, and so smaller units, different kinds of housing choices, and particularly as my generation and the generation before grows up, we'll have different kinds of lifestyles. We won't live on the quarter-acre section. No doubt, perhaps not many of you no longer are on a quarter-acre section, but no doubt you probably started your life on one. So that will change, and so there'll be more apartments, more terraced housing, more of those smaller units, and that's also useful for the aging population as well. Also, engagement as a council on anything we do. We really do try and get as much feedback and engagement from all our parts of our community, including our older community as well. And again, that's been raised, that can be difficult sometimes, whether that's language and ethnic differences, but also the ability to get out, the ability to interact, particularly when more and more is based on technology. So we're very aware of that. We're trying to balance the technology, more and more online, versus still the need and the importance of face-to-face, all those more traditional kinds, of talking and engaging with each other. So we have a range of different ways in which you can engage, talk to us, give us feedback. So that's a really important part of what we do in council as well. Let me leave it at that, because hopefully there'll be some questions coming through.
Megan, they're popping up as you speak. Can I just jump back quickly to Elizabeth? Here's just a very quick one, but it's so good I can't resist it. Why did you choose to have a robot seal rather than a robot domestic pet like a cat or dog? It's a good question.
Yeah. So it's not actually my animal. I didn't build it. It's actually built by a Japanese researcher called Takanori Shibata. And the reason that he made it a seal instead of a cat is that previously they tried to make robots that look like cats, but it's very difficult to make a robot that looks and behaves like a cat, because cats run around, they jump up everywhere, and people are very familiar with what cats look like. And so people were very critical of these robots. Whereas if you make a baby harp seal, most people have never seen a baby harp seal except on TV. And they lie on the ice and practically do nothing except maybe wiggle their flippers. So it's much easier to make a robot that doesn't have to run around. All it has to do is wiggle its flippers. And since people have never seen one, never had one in their own house before, they don't really know how it behaves. So that's why it's a seal.
Thank you very much. There's lots of questions heading that way. And finally in the panel, kia ora, Glenn, Tēnā koe, me. Would you open up a little on Māori and the partnerships?
Well, I suppose this morning I kind of had a reality check. I've had the flu for the last 3 weeks, and during the midst of that I found out I'm going to be a grandfather again, and I thought, well, I think I'll ring my mum. So I hadn't been down to see mum, and I rang her, and she was crying. My dad died about a few years back now, and I said, what's wrong, mum? And she said, well, actually, I was feeling a little lonely. And it struck me that isolation for old people and aged people is going to be a real issue that we must learn to handle and to manage. It struck me in a way that it never struck me before, because for Māori, the average age of a Māori person is 24 years. The average age for the general population is 40. There's a big difference. It means that our old people, our kaumātua and queer, are very lonely. Most of their sisters and brothers have died. Most of their family and friends have gone. So it means they're talking to younger generations. And the challenge before us as Māori is, how are we going to communicate and draw that knowledge from our kaumātua and queer, but also make them feel part of our society and our generation going forward. This is something that affects Māori uniquely in New Zealand because of this big age difference, but it also is something that will start to affect the general population of New Zealand as we see more and more young Māori come through, roughly around this 24-year age group, because the demographics aren't going to change. And one of the things that I've learnt as time's gone on, for Māori as far as aged concerns are, is how do we look after each other in a way that's traditional but actually has to draw down on the way our society is changing and drawing down on those things that we're learning now. Dementia is one of the many issues that's affecting families, and just care for our elderly kaumātua and queer in a way that we've never had to address before. And so there's that big issue there of inclusiveness, because a family because we already know that the mean Māori income at that 24-year age group is actually quite low. And that puts an extra burden on that family or that group. So in order to make Auckland an aged, friendly town or city, we're going to have to think about how are we going to create the situation where the young can still be part of the elderly and the elderly can still be part of the young, because actually there's no difference. It's just age and it's just years. But the wisdom and the knowledge is held in the elderly, and the get up and go, the kaha, as you like call it, is held with the young. And when there's too much kaha, wisdom goes out the door. And when there's too much wisdom or too much knowledge, well, the kaha doesn't actually happen at all. So, it's a matter of balancing those things from a Māori point of view between the rangatahi and those young ones coming through to those ones who are kaumātua and queer, and preventing isolation. And I think that's where, if we're going to be an age-friendly community or society, we're going to have to address those things on a more wider scale than just focusing on the aged, but more about focusing on our whole communities. And within that, for Māori, there's another disconnection, unfortunately, and that is for many, and our family were one. When we moved to the city, we always thought we were going to go back home. the reality is we are never going back to our original homesteads, because if we all turned up, the place would be overloaded with people. So, I mean, there's an acceptance now, and there's more acceptance every day amongst younger Māori that Auckland is their tūranga waiwai. And so by creating that understanding of tūranga waiwai, we then need to create that connection for our older people, that they have a place here in Auckland. They have a place here, that this can be their tūranga waiwai as well, and that Auckland is there for them as well as for our younger people and those generations coming after us. So I just wanted to kind of lay that down. I don't want to talk too long about the kōrero,
About Mahi, thank you.
there's a real kaupapa there.
Glenn, thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to think of your questions now, and we'll go into question time, and we've got great questions here. I'm going to do one to the panel, and it's obviously many of the disabled community are pretty interested in what we've got to say. So what is being done, planned, with the interface between age-friendly and disabled-friendly, especially those moderately so? Megan, maybe it's you, and Janet. Yes, so Janet.
We've worked with the disability panel on a number of issues. One real win that we've had was over the Central Rail link and the Mercury station up at Karangahape Road, which was going to be done as the first step, but then there was no money for the other, where the lift would be. Now, that was absolutely impossible. How would you get someone with a walker or a wheelchair up from where the Mercury Theatre is back up to Karangahape Road? Impossible. Then they said, oh, well, we'll put a little flat place there and we'll plant a tree and that'll be concrete and you can sit there for a while and have a rest on your way up. So, it didn't compute, did it?
No.
But thankfully, because of your generosity in paying your rates, the extra money that's coming from the petrol tax too will help to have that all done together. So it will happen now, I understand. I'm right, aren't I, Megan?
Yeah, I believe you are.
But we have worked, and we've also done work with the disability panel on the work that's been done by the Minister on disability issues.
There's good progress there.
Yeah.
Megan, would you like to add something?
Look, the only thing I'll add is, just as Janet said, certainly if we're thinking about public transport, that kind of access, the fleet, the bus fleet, the trains, I think are pretty good now. But we'll continue to make sure that all of that is accessible for whatever that means, whether it's disability or just having difficulty getting around. The other part, and Janet just mentioned it, is the government has got a discussion document out around kind of the building code and building act stuff, which sounds really boring. But part of what we're focusing on is what we call universal design, which again is this kind of code word, which just basically means being able to get around, and particularly the development of housing, for example, with wide enough door jams, flat areas, ability to live on a ground floor as opposed to just have a garage, say, there and then have to go upstairs. Being able to retrofit a house or design it straight off so that if you need to use a wheelchair or some kind of aid, then it's not going to be prohibitively expensive or that you have to move out in order to then perhaps retrofit that for those needs as you get older or through health reasons. So that's we're also focusing on that aspect to get the government to focus more on that from legislation. Thank
you. Some questions from the floor. Sir, we'll find mics, I think. They're coming. Thank you. Let's go with you.
Okay. My question is to you, Megan. You mentioned the advances of technology in terms of providing solutions for ratepayers. I work in a community centre environment. I run a community services trust in my home area. The constant message is isolation. And in my home area, council is closing our service centre. And increasingly that is the case, and service centres are moving increasingly towards the centre of Auckland rather than staying on the more extended reaches. That is isolating these communities, and I'm interested to know how you're going to cope with that for the ageing group that doesn't deal with technology well?
Thank you.
It's a very real issue. It's a very real issue for other organisations, as you know, banks, there are post offices. We're at this stage where, for whether it's efficiency, sometimes cost saving, all sorts of reasons, organisations are either centralising or moving to more online and technology-driven ways of communicating. Council's no different, so I won't be able to promise that we won't be, closing service centres or changing them, because we will still be doing that. I do think that it is going to be difficult for some time, and therefore we do need to provide other ways, like I said, to communicate with us. The communities around, as a community, we can help each other around that, whether it's giving people lifts, being, checking in on them during the day, all of those kinds of things that we've talked about. That's not about council, that's just being human to human. So there's a community responsibility, I think, or opportunity there as well. I also wonder, and no doubt others will have views, is that into the next 1 or 2 generations, this won't be such an issue in terms of the technology or the online thing. Doesn't mean the isolation will go away, though. So yes, council will have a role in that, but I think there's also some collective responsibility as humans and Aucklanders around what that could mean for us in our communities.
Thank you, Megan.
Tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora.
My question is kind of responding to Janet about age-friendly, because I take the bus a lot daily, and with my 2 kids, we help a lot of elderly on and off, or hold a bus so they can make it. But when Auckland Council changes the bus number or takes away a line, what kind of engagement do you do before you actually make those changes with the elderly in particular? Because change is a big deal, whether you're in isolation, you take away a post office, or you're in isolation, you take away all these things that elderly are used to. My kids are as concerned about those changes as I'm sure elderly are. And what is council doing if they do it the next time, or once they make the change, do they listen to the elderly when they're unhappy with those changes? And for instance, the Mount Eden bus changed from a number that was 274 to like 27R and 27H or something. So I sat on the bus stop for 5 hours with my kids and helped read buses for elderly because they couldn't tell if it was their bus. So what do you guys do about that is my question.
Looks like, Janet? Yeah.
First of all, it's part of the council family, of course, Auckland Transport, that deals with that. And we've had discussions, in inverted commas, with Auckland Transport too about similar things. And ours focused most recently on the changes to the hospital buses, because they decided that people could now walk another 400 or 500 yards to get to Green Lane Clinic. They didn't seem to understand what we were talking about, that if someone with a walker gets on a bus at Point Chevalier, and that's where a lot of the noise was coming from, they want to get off at the building, not halfway up the road back towards home. And I think they have taken that argument on board, and there are changes being made in that particular one. But yes, they do now come to not just to the local boards and to the governing body, but they do come to the panels as well. They have learnt that we are quite helpful and we don't bite. But we might if they don't listen.
Thank you. Another question there. Thank you for that, Mike.
Thank you very much to the panel. I'm Vivian. I have a question. I've recently moved into the central city. It's about 3 years ago, and so I'm seeing it with new eyes and walking everywhere, taking buses, and congratulations to the council. The footpaths are amazing. They're well built. The buses run on time mostly, and I'm really, really enjoying it. My question is anybody thinking of the air quality? That's the one thing I'm noticing. I've noticed since I moved into the city. I'm walking down the road and I'm getting whiffs of diesel and fumes, and that's my question. I'm not sure if this is in your scope, but that's my question.
Thank you, Vivian. Very happy to answer that. The answer is yes. having said that, that doesn't mean it's going to change overnight, but the answer is yes. We regularly monitor, I think it's about 2 or 3 sites in the city centre, plus a whole bunch else around the region. And you're right, there are certain parts, particularly down towards Key Street and things, which are incredibly high in toxins, mainly from idling cars. So the answer is yes. We are doing work, whether it's the electrification of the bus fleet. We will be, it's going to get harder and harder to bring cars into the city centre. No surprise to you tonight for those of you who had to try and find a park, but that's just going to get harder and harder. And we're not apologising for that, because we want to be able to provide the options of public transport and other ways of getting in here. So, look, there are going to be changes, things are going to improve, and we are working on that.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in quickly with a quick question back to you. I guess, Elizabeth, it's called, what's the cost of a robot?
Well, there are lots of different kinds of robots, and they have different prices. The Paro, the seal, is quite expensive. It's $7,000. So for an individual, it's quite, expensive. But there are, for a rest home facility, retirement village, they can buy one for many people to share. There are other people working on other much cheaper kinds of pet-type robots, more like $100. But the research hasn't been done on how beneficial they are compared to the seal robot. So the seal one has had the most research done on it. The other robots, like the cognitive reminder ones, they are more like $4,000. And, a lot of these robots are still in the research phase, and you can't actually buy them. But, Alexa, for example, that's only $150. So if you don't want one of the physically assistive ones, it's pretty cheap. Essentially, the more arms or legs or moving parts it's got to it, the more expensive it's going to be.
Do they catch rats? There's a plague of rats I heard on the radio this morning, including my good self. The summer has produced,
There might be some that catch rats, but I don't know about them.
Thank you. Now there's a couple of other questions. Yes, please.
Thank you. Couple of things. The bus service is not very reliable. Sometimes you wait, there's supposed to be one coming, you wait, nothing happens. And then the next thing, there's 2 come past, very fast. And half the time, second bus, even if you haven't caught the first bus, has disappeared. It's gone so fast. They have little races, I think, sometimes to get through. The other thing is that I'm very concerned that nobody has mentioned the Hauraki Gulf. And that's our lifeblood. And it's very, very important that we should take care of it, and that we shouldn't keep on dropping bits of developments into the place and letting all the killing what's underneath. So that, we have far less seabirds these days. I used to remember the flocks of seabirds. Not now. Very few. And why? It's not just the nesting places which get disturbed, but it's also the fact that there's far less fish because we're not looking after our stocks. We're not looking after our land, and that's the most important thing of all. Thank you.
Very fine. Thank you. I have to say, on Sunday, I went to Waiheke and was asked to chair the meeting. This is a wonderful meeting, I have to say, after Waiheke. But they should listen to that kind of thing because they want to change the system. And they love Auckland Transport on Waiheke. They haven't known about those buses that whiz by very quickly. Back to, at the back, may I go there and I'll come to you. Hi, you've got a mic?
Hello.
Where are you?
Bob,
Here we are.
my name is Paul and Kira everybody. I'm a grandparent. I'm a Westies as well for 25 years. Yeah, people used to tell me before I step into New Zealand, they say, why you go to the Wild West? But I think it has developed some good. And I used to thank Holland transport that I use train every day regularly, and I think the super go-kart, so I can move around and I don't feel isolated and so on.
Yes.
And because I want to be active, I'm 69 now, and I walk about 1 or 2 hours a day. So, and also thanks to Maori Warden, always keep me safe when I go back at night time, and I think it's a very useful service to the public safety, especially when I'm old and you see young men group together. I get a bit frightened at times with the drinks and so on. Now, so sorry, because I'm with this, I want to direct the question is, I've heard that volunteer, grandparents, all these are values to the community for the well-being and all these things. And especially the thing is, especially speaking for Asian community or any city, that the grandparents is valuable to the as Gloria explained and so on. Although, yeah. So the thing is, I like to say something about the immigration policy. I'm not sure what is the situation now, that they are not really encouraging reunion policy for parents to come with their parents. So I don't know that it serves a good purpose for the society and for well-being. I think we should try to influence the government or the immigration that they should think in terms of that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So Gloria, I think, is more than able to. Yes,
thank you.
You got that.
I think in terms of the immigration policy, our organization have been consulted as well. So definitely we gave the feedback actually because of the birth control policy in China. So now the skilled migrant, like at my age, we are all the only child in China. So we do carry the responsibility by ourselves to take care of our parents. So if our parents cannot stay with us, which means we need to have another plan to stay with them in the future. So that's the reality, and that's our obligation and the responsibility that we carry. Yeah, but I also understand about the rapid growth of the population over here in New Zealand, and the government, they have the policy try to control that kind of increase the population based on some policies to ensure the health and safety and the overall operation of the society, because of our capacity of the society is there, but the increasing population and the speed is constantly growing. However, as I mentioned, and I fully support with you, so if we want to, immigration is definitely a key source for having one of the main channels to keeping the knowledge and skills for the New Zealand society, for development, and in the meantime, it's very important for the economic development. So if the government want to keep this trend and contribution of skilled migrant continuing, this kind of family reunion policy needs to be reconsidered in the future whenever it's possible. That's the reality, and yeah.
Good question, a very good answer. Thank you. I'll jump here quickly before we go back to you, and that's what language should be used to describe people over a certain age, as many of us just do not associate with old senior, you bet, as there is always someone older. Smart question. Does anyone want to grab that, Janet or Glenn?
They talk about, as I think you see in the papers you've got, they talk about the young old, the old, and the
ancient.
We won't go there.
The terminology certainly needs to change,
yes,
right? I agree.
Personally, I don't mind people talking about people being old. I'm quite proud of the wrinkles.
Yeah.
Because my family does not have a good history. My parents both died before they were 60. My mother died at 50 and my father at 57. So I think I've done pretty well to get to the stage I am. And I don't mind if they tell me I need polyfiller, that's all right.
I'd never say that to you, Janet.
No, you wouldn't dare.
That's right. Thank you, Janet. Now, where was the mic? Sir, in the middle. Thank you. Here's one coming for you.
My question's on the transport. It's good that we sort of will take the bus and the train, but what are we doing about, like yesterday, met somebody at the Newmarket station. The friend that we were walking with had to come from New Lynn, well, from Huia to New Lynn. There's nowhere to sort of park at New Lynn. There's no buses to Huia. Obviously, that's in isolation. How are we going to sort of, obviously, we're encouraging people to sort of not drive into the city. What are we doing in terms of trying to actually make the other end of the transport loops work? The idea of getting to Devonport and then finding, well, there's only buses up the road every half hour in the middle of the day isn't much fun to, I got that far. Now how do I get the next bit down the link?
Yeah, it's a brave question. Megan.
The honest answer, of course, is that it is a work in progress. And for those of you who've lived in Auckland for a long time, perhaps your whole lives, certainly over the last 10 years or so, would hopefully agree that there's been enormous improvement in the amount and choice and opportunity of public transport. Are we there yet? No. Are we perfect? No. So look, you're absolutely right though. That last mile, that last bit thing, getting to a piece of public transport or getting home is probably the most difficult part of the puzzle. Getting into a centre or so, is kind of the easy bit. She says that without having to find the budget for it, but you know what I mean. So look, and I also think of, I mentioned e-scooters, but there will be other mobility options coming just through technology and all sorts, whether it's scooters that you can sit on. Who knows what can come into the future. So the car is not going to always be the only thing that's going to get you that last bit. I don't know what that might be, but there will always need to be some car-based transport in Auckland, and we will just continue to get better and better around that public transport provision.
Anonymous here says, is there any mobility options such as adult tricycles on the horizon?
I do, but look, I know in other cities they're starting to trial, those kind of trikes, bikes that are more like mobility scooters in the sense of sitting on them, having the opportunity to put bags or kind of luggage around it. So absolutely, that's being done. Probably hasn't quite hit here yet, but there's drones. There's all sorts. I mean, look, who knows what the opportunities will be, and they'll carry people at some point.
Save us from that. At the back. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ruth. My question, I think, touches on a number of things that have been spoken about tonight. Janet Clews spoke earlier about institutional knowledge and the great sort of wisdom, expertise. I mean, our older people. I mean, when I was a kid, people got to 60 and you just thought they were sitting in God's waiting room. And our attitudes to age and our ageing, it's different now. Now 60 is young. It's not old anymore. It is young. And so the whole thing has just, changed. But there's, you talked about the loyalty, the expertise, the fabulous contribution that people still have to make into their 90s until they're 100 and they're on their surfboard and whatever they're doing, which was unheard of when I was a kid. We've talked about transport, about difficulties for the older people with transport, about things like service centres being centralised and moving away from where people live. And I've got a real issue with how we keep our ageing population more engaged. How do we communicate with them? And I see this a lot from council where every consultation, have your say, but only if you're online, only if you can do it online. And there'll be a service centre miles and miles away that you have to get 3 buses to pick up a hard copy if you're somebody who isn't technically aware and doesn't have the facility. This also affects our older people and the lower socios who don't have laptops and all that tech at home and they're not on their devices. And, some of you are. The people here in this room probably all are. But there are lots who are not, who probably don't know about tonight and might have a valuable contribution because they don't have the money for the laptop, the device, the flash stuff. They're not tech aware, whatever. So, I was involved in a consultation recently where the local Grey Power branch said, we want to send this out to our 3,000 members. 3 weeks later, a couple of days before the consultation closed.
Now, is there a question going to pop up in a minute?
Yeah. Council finally turned up with some hard copies. It was too late for us to post them out to the army. So what are council going to do to reach out and make sure that older people can be engaged on whatever topic if they're interested in, because they're just being left out?
I hear that and understand, and I mean, I'll certainly take that back, and I've got colleagues in the room that are hearing that too. Look, it is an issue, I totally agree. Also, there are lower socioeconomic areas. There are young people that don't have devices, and you know, there's affordabilities at all ends of the spectrum, but certainly ability and affordability with the older people as well. So, look, I hear that. I can't promise that we're perfect, but we do need to still provide opportunities online and offline, more face-to-face.
And closer to home. Thank you. Now, I'm sorry. Thank you for waiting. Janet, I'll just... Thank you for waiting.
Okay, thank you. Is this working yet? A few years ago when I was on the local board with Pippa here locally, I was approached by... Hello there, Kazibro. I was approached by contacted by a woman in her 80s who had no trouble getting into town on the bus, but she had lost her nerve about walking up Queen Street because since there was no longer a line down the middle of the pavement, swishy new black pavements, couldn't have a white line down them, she was faced with walking up through a tide of people coming towards her, the full width of the pavement, all with their noses in their phones, nobody looking where they were going. And she was frail, and she just said, I can no longer go into town because I can't handle that at all. So is she going to be met at the bus stop by a robot or a mobility scooter of some description? How do we deal with that?
That's a tough one. Don't we see it? The new generation addicted, totally addicted to the iPhone. Yeah. Who's brave enough to... Well... what about Elizabeth?
I think
Elizabeth,
one option would be to get on the Link bus and take it and have a nice little free ride round until you get to where you want to go. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm going to.
Steve Brunius says the best bus is number 18. It gives you a tour of the whole Auckland.
There is,
but Steve Brunius would say
one.
that. Yes. Elizabeth, do you want to?
It's a very genuine question. And I agree with the white line down the middle, but then people don't drive always on the right side either, do they?
Thank you. It's a good question. Sir, at the back.
Yes, I'd like to make a short observation and a question arising from that.
Sure.
As you get older, you become much more aware of your mortality.
Really?
I go to my wine shop sometimes and the guy might say, this is going to be a really good wine in 10 years' time. And I say, I don't want one in 10 years' time.
I want it now.
And I'd make the same observation about a lot we're hearing tonight. I mean, I want to know what's going to happen in my lifetime that'll help me as an aged person. And what I'm getting is that, frankly, we don't want old people in the city centre, because the public transport's not going to get them there all that efficiently, and if it does, they're going to get run over or bowled over by a scooter or something anyway. What you need to be aware of is that older people are concerned about their vulnerability to being knocked over, to having bones broken, all that sort of thing. And all this thing about scooters and such like actually is pretty scary. And I don't think that's a solution. I think you're not giving enough thought at all to making this friendly to older people. So what is the policy for looking after older people?
You're going to get some applause for this. What was your question? Because it was a hell of a good statement. What did you have a question?
Well, the question is, how are you going to make Auckland City friendly to older people when everything that I'm hearing is saying we don't want older people there, we're going to cut them out?
Well, not in this hall. I think that we love the idea of being older. And there's a lot of courage in this room, but it takes courage out there. Look.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you.
My lifetime will use cars. And They need mobility parking places. They need places where it's easy for them to do that. I mean, my mum, who is 99, just died last year, and she loved to go out to those sort of things. But without mobility spaces and that sort of thing, it's impossible.
Thank you.
Basically, you're saying the CBD is becoming an age-unfriendly area, basically. Is that what I'm hearing?
Thank you. Thank you. One more question, and then we're going to pull this together.
Let me just really quickly. You're mishearing what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's unfriendly, and we're not deliberately making it hard for anyone with a disability or access. But we do know that there needs to be change in this city, some of which will happen in our lifetime, and some of it will be in our kids' grandkids' lifetime, around the way in which we live in the city and move around it. So it's absolutely fundamental that when people can move, whether it's in a car, a bus, a train, in a scooter, however you're moving, that you can get somewhere safely, you can do whatever you need to do, and then you get back home safely. So that's absolutely what we're trying to do. Are we there yet? No. So we've got stuff we'll do, some in your lifetime, some not in your lifetime. The other thing is, remember, this is exactly what we're engaging on right now, which is this age-friendly action plan. We're taking notes. Please get involved in that engagement, again, face-to-face, online, whatever that looks like for you, because these are the changes we can make quickly. Are there ways, is there lines down the pavement, for example, that's going to help? I don't know, these kinds of things we want to hear from you. So that's what we're talking about tonight.
Thank you very much. Yes,
quickly. I agree with the mobility parks comment down there. The panel has brought that up on regular occasions with Auckland Transport. At the moment, they tell us that they're doing a trial in Devonport to make sure that they can use, like a shuttle that you can get to go to the ferry, for instance. Now, how successful that has been, I don't know categorically, but I've heard things that are not too good about that. The argument that was put to us was that you won't need to worry about the mobility parking because there'll be other ways to get you to where you want to go. So that's a real thing that we'll keep working on. Could I just say too that I really apologise at the beginning. I should have mentioned that some of my colleagues are here with us tonight, and I think my Deputy Chair David is here. David Wong Hop, is he? There he is, David Wong Hop, and Judy Blakey,
Judy,
over here, and Mary Tunks.
Kia ora,
is there anyone I've missed?
No.
Thank you for acknowledging those people. They're the ones that have helped to get us where we are.
You promised that you would finish the night with a poem, because not only are you a damn good counsellor, but you're a damn good poet. And you said, I'll bring my poem along.
You did.
Do you want to quickly round up this wonderful hour with a poem, and then we're going to ask Ross Clow to pop up on stage.
You're
and
free
thank
to go
you
now if you'd rather. It's actually one that some of you here have heard before, that I did last year for the International Day of the Older Person at AUT.
The floor is yours, Janet.
Valerie Rice and Claire in front of me, so I'll probably bumble through like I did last time. I called it Where Are We? And it starts off. Well, it will if I can find it. There we are. I always say you should have a bit of fun along the way, even if they're serious things you're talking about. So this is my take. Where are we? We've reached the point where tweaks in joints now plague our daily life, where dental crowns bring massive frowns that lead to mental strife. We see our doc, who thinks old crock, but checks our varied ills, then does the tests, and he knows best, so we just take the pills. Cataracts for the lops, remember the drops, recovered better sight. Telly's now clear, it's not even near, everything seems so bright. Podiatrist calls, discomfort galls, can't even reach our toes. Nails are soon clipped, corns are all nipped, calluses finally goes. TV at full bore, folks' ears get sore. Something needs to be done. Audio test, oh what a pest, but aids are really such fun. Just dropped my keys, can't get on my knees, back aching, oh what a sight. Archers that fall, won't get to the ball, think it's an early night. Struggle to bed. What's that you said? Age is a time to rest? Fat chance of that. Here comes the cat, being as usual a pest. Morpheus comes, cat gently hums, both in the land of dreams. In our prime there, without a care, fit as a fiddle, it seems. Soon morning will break, the bed I will make. Routine is so fulfilling. See you next year, perhaps even here, God willing.
Thank you, Janet. I'd like to thank you all, and I'm going to ask Councillor Ross Clow and fellow Westie to thank our panel and thank you. Ross Clow.
Thank you, Bob. Kia ora, talofa, lava malawale, ni hao, namaste, all. I represent the Faux Ward, yes, another Westie, so I'm Avondale, Newland, Blockhouse Bay, around there, and I chair the Finance Committee, and I can say I'm listening to a number of things, and it's not with trepidation, but we know a lot of these things cost a lot of money. I've been asked to just really summarise what are some of the key messages that I'm hearing, and I'm going to be pretty quick about it. It seems to me, and I've known all this, because that seniors want to be respected, they want to be valued, they want to be listened to, not taken for granted, not treated as anonymous, not socially isolated, and allowed to contribute. Megan and the team, and I can trust you, the councillors, are aware of that. There's a good number of us that are seniors. I'm actually a senior, picked up my gold card last year, and Winston, you love him or you hate him, but it doesn't matter. That's been a great innovation, and a big thing that the gold card does is it gets you out for free, and it gets you out. People are not socially isolated if you're able to get out and around, but you can get out and around for nothing, and that's the important element of the gold card. There are other advantages. I must admit I haven't used any of the others, but I've certainly used the public transport. I just want to give one little example about how hard it can be, though. There will be a number of you in this room that possibly use the car park by the town hall. There is a lift by the car park in the corner by the town hall. It is frequently broken. I have been debilitated a couple of times in the last 6 or 7 months, once with a new knee, and once, and I should say the last 4 or 5 weeks, with some significant back spasms. And I get out, and then the lift is not working. So I've been battling away with Auckland Transport for over 6 months to get that lift fixed. There are some reasons, weather, etc., and unfortunately we're getting some destruction by people in the lift and that, so it's breaking down. But the bottom line is going on for too long, because disabled people or seniors that just find the mobility a bit difficult are having to go right to the other end of the car park, come across the square. It's just not acceptable, but Megan's aware that sometimes things take a very long time. So I'm going to thank Bob, thank Janet and Gloria, Elizabeth, Megan, Glenn. I think I mentioned you, Bob. And I thank the audience for attending and the online audience that's out there. I want to give you an example, though, of how you can be doing these things, all those things by being involved, etc. Is just the example of my good friend Janet Clews, who I've stood with a number of times out on Waitakere days. Now, I'm not allowed to mention Janet's age. Bob went through the men, but not the women, so I'm not allowed to use that as an example. But Janet's someone, as a politician, is the politician I've respected most. Sorry about that, Bob. But Janet has been doing, she's been bar 1 year, has been a continuously elected official for 55 years now. And Janet is still elected. I am chair of the Portage Licensing Trust out west. Janet has been a trustee and is still a trustee, I think, for 35 years. So thank you very much for coming. It's been a very good evening, and we hope it's been positive for you. And remember all the feedback forms and sites, etc., etc. Thank you very much.